Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and welcome to Overwatch Central. Wait, Ryan's not talking about Myra in a video on his own? This is strange. Well, actually, I wanted to talk about something else whilst the timing was still right. Before I went to BlizzCon, I made a lot of videos in advance just to cover whilst I was away, and one of those videos that I was going to put out was to do with defense heroes and how I feel a lot of the community are mishandling them. And since then, we've had the Overwatch World Cup Finals, and most of you know I'm going to talk about the Bastion strategy on Junkertown, but also Flower's Widowmaker on Hanamura. Of course, when you look at the likes of Pharah, Winston, Tracer, you want to maybe pick up the likes of Soldier, Reaper, and McCree respectively to actually take them down. This is much more straightforward with tanks and DPS heroes, but I think it gets a little bit more complicated when defense heroes come into play. Bastion, Hanzo, Junkrat, Mei, Torbjorn, and Widowmaker have all sort of surged in popularity ever since the game has been feeling much more free. Heroes are much more viable, meaning that you are going to see these heroes a lot more, and cheese comp is of course a very strong and viable strategy, even at the highest tiers of Overwatch. Countering heroes is an important thing to do in a hero-based FPS game, and the fact that you could change pretty much any time in the game means that there's no excuse to change to a certain strong hero when you're trying to counter another one. However, I feel that there's a big problem when it comes to the defense heroes and also a few offensive other options, and I just overall feel that there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to dealing with said heroes, and I think it's causing a lot more problems than good. When it comes to the difference between offense and defense heroes, way back when the game was put into live, a lot of players just assumed, you know, you play the attack heroes on attack and you play the defense heroes on defense. It's not really that difficult to get your head around it. Whereas I think the lines have blurred over time. You can still play the likes of Tracer, McCree on defense, and you can certainly bring out the attack Bastion now and again for decent results. But I think there's a real significant difference, and I think it's the point of frustration for defense heroes as well, certainly going up against them. Say for example, you're going up against a Genji but he's not very good. You don't really need to worry about him, right? You don't really need to deal with him because your team is just taking care of him. Whereas, let's say Bastion, same sort of skill cap. Regardless of how good the Bastion is, you need to deal with him. And there's no better example in this than Widowmaker. We'll say that you are attacking on Ilios on Ruins, that part of the map, and the enemy have a Widowmaker. Now, she isn't popping off. She isn't going to get played a game or anything. She's not killing everybody on her own, but she's getting a couple of picks. She's causing a lot of problems, and you lose the point. What's the first point to call? Somebody switch to Winston, right? Winston is really good against Widowmaker and all forms of snipers, just because he can get up to the high ground close-up distance, has a lot of health to deal with it, and can just essentially smush him a little. But that's not enough. The Widowmaker's managing to slip away fairly easily, and your Winston has been teared apart by the enemy's Roadhog. Now, what is the problem here? Well, there's various problems, but it all boils down to the fact that nothing is dealing with a Widowmaker, and what is dealing with a Widowmaker is running into problems of its own. We of course saw a good example of this with Flower's Widowmaker on Hanamura against the US of A. Whilst Flower did pull off some amazing shots and got some pretty good picks, that wasn't the reason why South Korea won the point. It was because of the way that the Widowmaker forced USA to play. Flower is just going to take that high ground and essentially say, haha, come and get me, because it means that players like Jake, Fact Fiction on the Winston, Cool Matt on the D-Verd, Sinatra of course, have to actually engage onto Flower to deal with him. It's more of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. If nobody engages on Flower, he's just going to headshot the rest of your team. But if you try and jump onto him like we're seeing the tanks do here, the South Korean tank duo are just going to jump on top of you and finish you off with relative ease. And then you go back to the second sort of attack with Widowmaker with Flower, and you can see that USA are being very reserved. They're not giving up any ground, they're not moving, they're making sure that they can't be seen by Flower, and at that point, Flower's shut down. Nobody's killing him, but he's not doing his job. That's the thing about defense heroes as well, they are designed to try and catch you out. But if you could sort of see it coming, you've experienced it before, and you're talking and coordinating with your team, it's actually quite easy to shut it down. The footage in the background isn't some random stuff that we've just thrown in for the sake of it. The first game where I'm playing Roadhog on Oasis, they had a Widowmaker that was doing pretty well up until that point. She didn't do anything. And that's not because this Widowmaker wasn't very good, it's because we called out where she was, and it allowed the Genji on our team and others to jump and shut her down with relative ease. Because we did that, she had no impact on the game whatsoever. The defense heroes live and breathe for causing chaos to the enemy team. And these heroes perform at their best when the enemy is disorganized, uncoordinated, and struggling to have an answer to what you want to do. That's why cheese comp is really strong at the moment, because it relies on the fact that your team aren't going to coordinate or communicate, that nobody's going to sort out things on comms, that you're just going to get tilted and start blaming each other, and cheese has effectively done its job. If a team is coordinating and willing to take it out, 9 times out of 10 it will. Doesn't really matter what heroes that you're playing, but if you play as a team and you dive the targets and target prioritization is an actual thing on your team, you will be able to break through it the first time around. Having said that, I'm well aware that the gameplay in the background is the pros, which are the best players and most coordinated players struggling to deal with cheese comp on Junkertown. And I feel that that's more of a problem with the map in the old Mercy meta rather than cheese comp in itself. But I figured it was good footage to put in the background to show teams really struggling to deal with cheese comp and the areas that it's strong. You've got a Bastion on the payload and a Widowmaker in the backline shooting at you. Who do you deal with first? And therein lies the problem. But hopefully you're starting to see the point that we are raising about defense heroes, that they can cause a lot of problems without actually having to need to do anything. Here's another example for when we were defending on Hanamura's second point. We had to hold about 50% of the point, otherwise we'd lose. So everybody was jumping on the point, it was still being contested, you know, the likes of May and Reaper came out just to stall the point a little bit more. But the enemy had a Hanzo right on the high ground, just above the point where you'd usually find an aggressive soldier, for example. The Hanzo didn't kill a thing, he did a little bit of damage, but he didn't ultimately get a lot of the kills. But the pressure that he was putting on our team was too much for us to actually deal with. Even though it's the likes of a soldier or a tracer on the point that's actually killing the team, the Hanzo caused a lot of problems for us, and we didn't have the capabilities to deal with it and also protect the point. So that's what defense heroes are good at. They're good at stretching your team thin. That's why Bastion on the payload again works, because your team aren't sure whether they need to be aggressive and dive the Bastion and kill him quickly, or whether they should keep backing off. And one by one your team starts to fall back. You can't engage as a group. It's seemingly impossible to group up, first of all, because you're constantly being staggered, and that's where Bastion relishes in those situations. All of these heroes enjoy taking your team apart one by one and making sure that you can't engage as a full 6-man team. Bastion will mow you down, Hanzo and Widow can get picks fairly easily, Torbjorn can Molten Core, Junkrat can Rip Tire, and May can just freeze out players one by one. Offense heroes are very good in 6v6 situations, whereas defense heroes want to avoid them, and they're going to systematically tear your team apart one by one. So it's not really a case of just change to a hero and win. To be honest, that hasn't been the case in Overwatch for quite some time. I had a game where I was playing Winston, and I had somebody on my team get very upset at the fact that I was playing Winston into Reaper. Now, of course, Reaper is very strong against Winston, I'm certainly not denying that. But with the amount of hours that I've spent on Winston, I've learned how to deal with Reapers and Roadhogs in a way that I'm not getting, in inverted commas, hard counted by them. And it goes back again to Widowmaker on Ilios on Ruins being dived by Winston, a scenario that she has been in countless times and has got very good at dealing with. The Winston, however, doesn't play an awful lot of him and is getting killed time and time again. So this is what I mean about stretching your team really thin. It doesn't really matter what heroes that you can play into the likes of Bastion. I see a lot of Reddit posts talking about what tanks to play into the likes of Cheese Comp, but I don't think it matters as much as having a team that are actually going to follow you depending on what hero. Reinhardt and Winston get eaten up quite quickly by the likes of Bastion and Orisa, but if you're diving with your team onto certain targets, it doesn't really matter what you play, because it's more about the coordination of working with your team than any hero that you're actually playing. So what is the point in this video? Simply to highlight that defense heroes want to tear your team apart. They want to make sure that you are uncoordinated, that you're switching heroes to stuff that you're uncomfortable with, but they really hate when a team comes together to take it down. So essentially that's the misconception. You don't just pick a hero into Cheese Comp to win it. It doesn't work like that. Hard counters are not really things that you see nowadays. But if you do run into a Widowmaker on Ilios, you need to stress to your team that it requires all of you to take her down. If somebody changes to Winston and is struggling, try and help them out as much as you can. And vice versa, if you're the one that's diving a Widowmaker, ask your team for help if you're struggling. It's a team game, you're supposed to work together, and that's why these defense heroes are really good at the moment, because they will tear you apart. Make sure that your team starts tilting at one another, and rely a lot on that aspect of Overwatch more than mechanical skill. But that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Do let us know what you think of these heroes, and give also some of your tips as well for dealing with some of these problematic heroes, the likes of Cheese Comp. Let us know below. And until next time, take care. We'll see you then.